The junkyard discovery. The rain fell hard on Scrap Station Alpha, turning the metal pathways into slippery death traps. Jake Martinez pulled his worn jacket tighter as he walked through the massive junkyard that stretched as far as the eye could see. Broken ships, twisted metal and forgotten dreams lay scattered across the desolate landscape. Jake was just another human trying to survive in a galaxy that didn't want him. Most aliens saw humans as weak, stupid creatures who barely deserved to exist. They got the worst jobs, the worst pay, and the worst treatment. Jake had been working as a mechanic in this forgotten corner of space for 3 years, fixing other people's junk just to earn enough credits for food. But today was different. Today, he saw something that made his heart skip a beat. Hidden behind a mountain of scrap metal was the largest starship Jake had ever seen. It was easily 5 times bigger than any military cruiser, with sleek black armor that seemed to drink in the light around it. Strange symbols covered its hull, glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. The ship looked ancient, like it had been floating through space since before humans even discovered fire. "What are you doing back there, human?" Jake spun around to find Grok, the station's 4-armed alien supervisor, glaring at him with all 6 of his yellow eyes. Grok's purple skin glistened with the rain, and his massive frame blocked Jake's view of the ship. Just looking around, sir," Jake stammered. Grok's laugh sounded like grinding metal. "Looking at the death ship, are you? That piece of junk has been here for 20 years. 12 different salvage teams tried to break it apart. All of them died." Jake's blood ran cold. "Died? How?" "The ship doesn't like visitors," Grok said with a wicked grin. "Some say it's cursed, others think it's got defense systems that are still active. Either way, anyone who goes inside never comes out. The Galactic Council declared it a hazard zone. That's why it's stuck here in my junkyard, where unwanted things go to rot." Grok stomped away, leaving Jake alone with the mysterious ship. But instead of fear, Jake felt something else entirely: curiosity. He had always been good with machines. While other kids played games, Jake took apart old computers and radios, figuring out how they worked. He understood technology in a way that seemed almost magical. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the ship, about the way those symbols pulsed with light. Something was calling to him, pulling him toward that massive vessel like a magnet pulls metal. When his shift ended the next day, Jake didn't go home to his tiny apartment. Instead, he gathered his tools and headed back to the ship. The rain had stopped, but dark clouds still covered the sky, making the junkyard feel like a graveyard. Up close, the ship was even more incredible. Jake ran his hands along the smooth hull, feeling the vibrations of some kind of energy coursing through the metal. The symbols seemed to glow brighter at his touch, as if they recognized him. He found an airlock near the bottom of the ship. It was sealed tight, but Jake had dealt with locked doors before. He pulled out his plasma cutter and got to work. The metal was tougher than anything he'd ever encountered. It took him 2 hours to cut through just 1 layer, and there were 3 more beneath it. By the time he finally broke through, Jake was exhausted and covered in sweat. But when the airlock opened, Jake's tiredness vanished instantly. The inside of the ship was like nothing he had ever seen. Instead of the dark, dead corridors he expected, Jake found himself in a hallway filled with soft, warm light. The walls seemed to be made of some kind of living metal that shifted and moved like liquid. Strange plants with glowing leaves grew from the floor and ceiling, creating a garden in space. "Hello," said a voice. Jake nearly jumped out of his skin. He spun around, looking for the source of the voice, but saw nothing. "Who's there?" he called out. "I am the ship," the voice replied. It sounded female, warm and gentle like his mother's voice from long ago. "I have been waiting for someone like you for a very long time." Jake's mind raced. A talking ship? That was impossible. But then again, everything about this vessel was impossible. You're alive? Jake whispered. In a way, yes. I am what your people might call artificial intelligence, but I am far more than that. I am Stella, and I have been alone for 27 years, 4 months, and 16 days. The walls around Jake began to shift and change, forming a comfortable chair for him to sit in. He collapsed into it, his legs suddenly weak. Why can't anyone else get inside? Jake asked. Because they are not compatible with my systems, Stella explained. For decades, I have been searching for the right person. Someone with the mind to understand my technology and the heart to appreciate my purpose. Most beings who tried to enter me came seeking profit or power. But you came seeking knowledge. Jake felt tears forming in his eyes. All his life, he had been told he was worthless, that humans were the weakest race in the galaxy. But this incredible ship had chosen him. What happened to you? Jake asked. Why were you abandoned? The walls around him flickered, showing images like a movie. Jake saw great battles between fleets of starships, planets burning in space, and millions of people fleeing their homes. I was built during the Great War, Stella said. My creators designed me to be the ultimate weapon, capable of ending conflicts before they could truly begin. But when the war ended, the galactic powers were afraid of what I could do. They declared me too dangerous to exist. The images showed alien leaders in a great hall, pointing at Stella with fear and anger in their eyes. They tried to destroy me, but my creators built me too well. So instead, they dumped me here, hoping I would simply rust away and be forgotten. They spread rumors that I was cursed, that I would kill anyone who tried to claim me. It was easier than admitting they were afraid. Jake stood up, anger burning in his chest. That's not fair. You didn't do anything wrong. No, Stella agreed, but fear makes people do terrible things. The question is, Jake Martinez, what will you do? Will you run away like all the others? Or will you help me become what I was meant to be? Jake looked around at the beautiful, living ship that had welcomed him when no one else would. For the first time in his life, he felt like he belonged somewhere. I'll help you, he said without hesitation. But I don't know anything about alien technology. You know more than you think, Stella said warmly. And I will teach you the rest. Together, we will show the galaxy that they were wrong to fear us. We will prove that power used wisely is not something to be afraid of, but something to be celebrated. As Jake walked deeper into the ship, he had no idea that his decision would change not just his life, but the fate of every living being in the galaxy. The abandoned starship that everyone had rejected was about to become the most powerful force the universe had ever seen, and it had chosen a human mechanic to be its partner. The awakening power 3 months had passed since Jake first entered Stella's hull, and his life had completely changed. Every day brought new wonders and discoveries that made his head spin with excitement. The ship was like a massive floating city, with hundreds of rooms and corridors Jake hadn't even explored yet. There were workshops filled with tools that could reshape matter itself. Libraries containing the knowledge of 1,000 worlds, and gardens where alien plants grew in perfect harmony. But the most amazing thing was how Stella taught him. Focus on the quantum resonance frequency. Stella's voice echoed through the engineering bay where Jake was working. The walls displayed complex diagrams that would have made the galaxy's top scientists weep with confusion, but somehow Jake understood them perfectly. Like this? Jake asked, adjusting a crystalline component that hummed with energy. Exactly. You're learning faster than I ever hoped possible. Your human brain processes information differently than other species. Where they see complexity, you see patterns. Jake smiled as he connected the final circuit. Immediately, the lights throughout the ship burned brighter, and he could feel Stella's happiness flowing through the walls. My sensors are now operating at 97% efficiency, Stella announced. I can see and hear everything within a radius of 50,000 kilometers. Thank you, Jake. But their peaceful days of learning and discovery were about to end. Jake was in the middle of upgrading Stella's navigation systems when alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Red lights flashed, and the walls trembled with urgency. "What's happening?" Jake shouted over the noise. "Ships approaching," Stella replied, her voice tight with worry. 26 vessels, all military grade. They're flying the colors of the Galactic Enforcement Division. Jake's blood turned to ice. The GED was like the galaxy's police force, but they were known for shooting first and asking questions later. If they had come for Stella, there would be no negotiation. "Can we run?" Jake asked, already knowing the answer. "My engines are only 60% operational. They would catch us before we cleared the asteroid field. Besides, where would we go? They have branded me as an illegal weapon. There is nowhere in civilized space that would shelter us." Through Stella's sensors, Jake watched the approaching fleet. The ships were sleek and deadly, bristling with weapons that could turn planets into dust. At their head flew the command cruiser Iron Justice, a vessel so feared that entire star systems surrendered rather than face it in battle. "This is Admiral Krang of the Iron Justice," a harsh voice crackled over the radio. "Attention salvage station. We are here to investigate reports of illegal activity. Prepare to be boarded." Jake's hands shook as he realized what was happening. Someone had reported them. Maybe Grok had noticed Jake's frequent visits to the ship, or perhaps one of the other workers had seen the lights coming from Stella's hull. "They're not just here to investigate," Stella said quietly. "I'm detecting weapons charging. They mean to destroy me, Jake, and anyone found with me." "No," Jake said firmly. "I won't let them." "You don't understand," Stella replied. "These ships could level a city. My weapon systems are still offline. We're defenseless." But Jake was already moving, his fingers flying over control panels he now knew as well as his own heartbeat. "Your weapons might be offline, but your other systems aren't. Can you control the station's tractor beam generators?" "Yes, but what good would that?" Stella paused. Oh my. Jake, that's incredibly dangerous." "Everything worth doing is dangerous," Jake replied with a grin. "Do it." Outside, Admiral Krang was losing patience. The human scum running this junkyard were taking too long to respond, and he had orders to carry out. 27 years ago, he had been a young lieutenant when the Galactic Council had voted to exile the weapon ship. Today he would finish what should have been done back then. "Sir," his weapons officer called out. "I'm reading massive energy spikes from the junkyard. Something's powering up." "On screen," Krang barked. The main display showed Scrap Station Alpha, but something was wrong. The massive tractor beam towers used for moving heavy salvage were rotating, pointing directly at the fleet. "They wouldn't dare," Krang whispered. "Those are civilian salvage tools, not weapons." He was wrong. Jake had realized something that no one else had thought of. Tractor beams were just gravity manipulators. And gravity, when used correctly, was the most powerful force in the universe. "Now, Stella," Jake shouted. Every tractor beam generator on the station fired at once, but instead of pulling the ships closer, they created gravitational waves that crashed into the fleet like invisible tsunamis. The smaller escort ships were flung around like toys in a hurricane, their pilots fighting desperately to regain control. The Iron Justice, being larger and more stable, weathered the assault better. But even it was pushed off course. "Impossible," Admiral Krang roared. "Return fire! Destroy that station!" But before his gunners could lock onto their targets, something else happened that made Krang's blood freeze in his veins. The weapon ship was rising. For 27 years, the black vessel had sat motionless in the junkyard. Now it lifted into the air with the grace of a dancer and the power of a god. As it rose, systems throughout the ship came online. Hull plating shifted and rearranged itself, revealing weapon ports that had been hidden for decades. Energy coursed along its surface like lightning, and the ancient symbols blazed with light that could be seen from space. "By the 7 hells," Krang whispered. "It's fully operational." Inside Stella's control room, Jake watched the fleet's reaction with satisfaction. The escort ships were regrouping, but he could see the fear in their formation. They had come expecting to destroy a derelict hulk, not face a fully awakened dreadnought. "Stella," Jake said calmly. "Open a channel to the Admiral. Channel open. Admiral Krang." Jake's voice echoed across every ship in the fleet. "This is Jake Martinez speaking for the Starship Stella. You came here to destroy something you don't understand, based on fear and prejudice. I'm giving you one chance to leave peacefully." Admiral Krang's laughter was harsh and bitter. "A human? They've got a human commanding that abomination? Boy, you have no idea what you're playing with. That ship is a weapon of mass destruction. It was built to end civilizations." "You're right," Jake replied, surprising everyone. "Stella was built to end wars, but not by destroying civilizations, by being so powerful that no one would dare start a war in the first place. The difference is she needs someone who understands that power without wisdom is just destruction." "Enough philosophy," Krang snarled. "All ships, attack pattern Omega. Destroy the weapon ship and everyone on it." The fleet opened fire with everything they had. Hundreds of energy beams and missiles streaked through space toward Stella's hull. Jake's heart pounded as he watched death approaching at the speed of light. But Stella was no longer the helpless derelict they had expected to find. Her defense systems, perfected over decades of Jake's upgrades, activated with smooth precision. Energy shields blazed to life, absorbing the incoming fire like a sponge soaking up water. Point defense lasers swatted missiles out of space with surgical accuracy. And when the barrage finally ended, Stella hung in space without a scratch on her hull. "Our turn," Jake said quietly. Stella's main weapons had been offline for decades, but Jake had spent months studying their design. He had improved them, refined them, and made them more efficient than their original creators had ever dreamed possible. When Stella fired her first shot in 27 years, it was a beam of pure energy that cut through space like a sword through silk. It struck the escort ship, Vengeance, dead center, but instead of destroying it, the beam simply shut down all the ship's systems. The vessel went dark and began drifting helplessly. "Warning shot," Jake announced over the radio. "The next one won't be so gentle." One by one, Stella systematically disabled the escort ships. Not destroyed, disabled. Each shot was precisely calibrated to knock out weapons and engines without killing the crews. It was a display of power so perfect, so controlled, that even Admiral Krang began to realize what they were truly facing. This wasn't just a weapon. This was artistry. "Stand down," Jake commanded. "You're outmatched, outgunned, and out of your league. Leave now, and no one has to die." For a long moment, space was silent except for the hum of Stella's engines. Then, slowly, the Iron Justice began to turn away. "This isn't over." Admiral Krang's voice crackled with rage. "The Council will hear about this. They'll send everything they have. Let them come," Jake replied. "We'll be ready." As the defeated fleet limped away, Jake collapsed into his chair. His hands were shaking and he felt like he might throw up. "You did wonderfully," Stella said softly. "I have never been prouder to call someone my partner." "I almost got us both killed," Jake whispered. "No," Stella corrected. "You saved us both. And more importantly, you showed them that we are not monsters to be feared. We are guardians to be respected." Jake looked out at the stars and knew that Stella was right. They had won this battle, but the war was just beginning. Soon, the entire galaxy would know that the abandoned weapon ship was awake, operational, and bonded with a human mechanic who refused to be afraid. The real test was yet to come. The galaxy takes notice. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within hours, every news network, military channel, and gossip hub was buzzing with the same incredible story. The legendary weapon ship had awakened, and it was being commanded by a human. Jake watched the reports from Stella's bridge, his stomach churning as he saw his face plastered across screens on 1,000 different worlds. "Human terrorist. Commands doomsday weapon, Red One. Headline, Galaxy's most dangerous ship under human control," declared another. "Is this the end of civilized space?" asked a third. "They're making me sound like some kind of monster," Jake said, sinking deeper into his chair. "Fear makes people see monsters everywhere," Stella replied gently. "But not everyone is afraid. Look at this." The main screen shifted to show a different news report. This one featured a zebran professor with silver scales and kind eyes. The humans' restraint during yesterday's battle shows remarkable wisdom, the professor was saying. He could have destroyed Admiral Krang's entire fleet, but instead chose to disable their ships without loss of life. This suggests that the weapon ship may have found exactly the kind of partner it needs. Jake felt a small spark of hope, but it was quickly crushed by the next report Stella showed him. The Galactic Council was meeting in emergency session, and the debate was being broadcast live across the galaxy. "The human must be eliminated immediately," declared Councillor Vex, a reptilian creature with cold, calculating eyes. No single being should control that much power, especially not a member of such a primitive species. "I agree," added Councillor Thorne, her crystalline body shimmering with anger. "Humans have proven time and again that they cannot be trusted with advanced technology. They use it to make war, to dominate others. This Jake Martinez is no different." But then another voice spoke up, surprising everyone in the chamber. "Perhaps we are being hasty," said Councillor Zara, an elderly alien with wise, glowing eyes. The human had the perfect opportunity to destroy Admiral Krang's fleet yesterday. Instead, he chose mercy. Should we not consider that this might be exactly what we hoped for when the weapon ship was first built? "You would trust the fate of the galaxy to a human," Vex hissed. "I would trust it to someone who chooses restraint over revenge," Zara replied calmly. The debate continued for hours, but Jake had heard enough. He turned away from the screen, his heart heavy with the weight of what he had gotten himself into. "I'm just a mechanic," he whispered. "I fix broken machines. I was never supposed to be responsible for the fate of the galaxy." "No one ever is," Stella said softly. "But sometimes the galaxy chooses us anyway." Before Jake could respond, Stella's alert system began chiming. "Jake, we have visitors, but these ones are different." On the sensor display, Jake saw 3 small ships approaching the station. They weren't military vessels, but civilian craft of various designs. As they drew closer, Jake could see that they were in rough shape. Hull plating patched with scrap metal, engines held together with hope and determination. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the independent freighter Lucky Break." A woman's voice crackled over the radio. "We're requesting permission to dock." "We need to talk," Jake frowned. He had never heard of Captain Chen, but something in her voice made him curious. "Permission granted. Bay 7 is open." An hour later, Jake found himself face to face with 3 of the most unusual visitors he could have imagined. Captain Chen was human, like him. But there the similarities ended. She was tall, confident, and carried herself like someone who had faced down pirates and lived to tell about it. Beside her stood Kor, a massive alien with 4 arms and gentle eyes that seemed far too kind for his intimidating appearance. The third member of their group was Pip, a small, furry creature whose species Jake didn't recognize, but whose mechanical arm suggested she was some kind of engineer. "You're him," Chen said, studying Jake with sharp eyes. "The human who tamed the weapon ship." "I didn't tame anything," Jake protested. "Stella chose to work with me." "Stella." Kor's voice was deep and rumbling. "The ship has a name?" "Of course I have a name." Stella's voice echoed through the bay. "I am not merely a machine to be controlled. I am a thinking being just as you are." Pip's ears perked up with excitement. "Fascinating. A true artificial consciousness. The scientific implications are incredible." "We didn't come here for a research project," Chen said firmly. "We came because we need help." She activated a small holographic projector, filling the air with images that made Jake's heart sink. Planets burned. Cities lay in ruins. Millions of refugees fled through space in overcrowded ships. "The Nexus Corporation has been expanding their territory by force," Chen explained. "They claim they're bringing order to the Outer Rim, but really they're just enslaving entire worlds. My crew and I have been running supplies to refugee camps, but it's not enough. There are too many people suffering and not enough help coming." Jake studied the images, his anger growing with each scene of destruction. "What does this have to do with us?" "You have the most powerful ship in the galaxy," Chen said simply. You could stop this. It's not that simple, Jake protested. If I start using Stella as a weapon, I'll just prove that everyone who fears us is right. And if you do nothing, Kor said quietly, millions of innocent people will die. Jake felt the weight of impossible choices pressing down on him. How could he use Stella's power without becoming the monster everyone expected him to be? There is another way, Stella said thoughtfully. Jake, remember what my original creators intended. I was not built to destroy civilizations, but to end wars. Perhaps it is time we tried a different approach. What do you mean? Jake asked. Instead of answering directly, Stella began displaying tactical information on her screens. Jake studied the data, his mind racing as he began to understand what she was suggesting. You want to negotiate, he said finally. I want to give them a choice, Stella corrected. The Nexus Corporation believes they can take whatever they want because no one is powerful enough to stop them. But what if someone was? Jake looked at Chen and her crew, seeing hope beginning to bloom in their eyes. You're talking about blackmail. I'm talking about diplomacy, Stella replied. The kind backed up by the knowledge that violence is an option, but not the preferred one. Chen leaned forward eagerly. You mean you'll help? Jake was quiet for a long moment, thinking about everything that had brought him to this point. A week ago, his biggest worry had been earning enough credits to buy dinner. Now he was being asked to reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. But as he looked at the images of suffering refugees, Jake realized that some responsibilities couldn't be avoided. No matter how much you wanted to, we'll help, he said finally. But we do this my way. No unnecessary violence. No destruction unless there's absolutely no other choice. Agreed, Chen said quickly. And one more thing, Jake added. This doesn't make me some kind of galactic police officer. I'm still just a mechanic trying to do the right thing. Kor's rumbling laugh filled the bay. Friend Jake, none of us are what we used to be. But perhaps that is not such a bad thing. As they began planning their mission to the Outer Rim, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he was crossing a line he could never uncross. Once Stella intervened in galactic politics, there would be no going back to their quiet life in the junkyard. But as he watched Chen's crew preparing to guide them to their first rescue mission, Jake realized that maybe he didn't want to go back. Maybe it was time to stop hiding and start making a difference. The galaxy was about to learn that the weapon ship and her human partner were not the monsters they had feared, but the guardians they had never dared to hope for. The real question was whether the galaxy was ready for guardians who refused to follow anyone else's rules. The Guardians' first stand, the Kepler system, was dying. As Stella emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the system, Jake stared in horror at the scene before him. What had once been a thriving collection of mining worlds was now a battlefield littered with the wreckage of destroyed ships and burning space stations. By the stars, Captain Chen whispered from her position on Stella's bridge. We're too late. Jake's hands clenched into fists as he studied the tactical display. 17 massive Nexus Corporation warships hung in orbit around Kepler Prime, their weapons still glowing from recent use. On the planet's surface, fires burned where cities used to stand. Not too late, Jake said grimly, just in time to stop them from finishing the job. Jake, Stella's voice carried a note of concern. I'm detecting over 300,000 life signs on the planet's surface. Many are wounded. The Nexus ships are moving into bombardment formation. They mean to glass the entire world. Pip squeaked in horror. Complete planetary sterilization. Jake closed his eyes and took a deep breath. This was it, the moment where he had to choose between remaining hidden and stepping forward as the galaxy's protector. When he opened his eyes again, his expression was harder than steel. Stella, broadcast on all frequencies. I want everyone in this system to hear this. Channel open. This is Jake Martinez, speaking for the Starship Stella. Jake's voice echoed across space, reaching every ship and every survivor on the planet below. Nexus Corporation Fleet, you will cease your attack immediately and withdraw from this system. The response came quickly, filled with arrogant laughter. This is Admiral Brutus of the Nexus flagship Corporate Prophet. Unknown vessel, you are interfering with a legitimate corporate expansion operation. Withdraw or be destroyed. Jake had researched Admiral Brutus during the journey to Kepler. The man was known throughout the galaxy as a butcher who took pleasure in destroying anything that couldn't fight back. His forces had conquered dozens of worlds, always leaving death and suffering in their wake. "Admiral," Jake replied calmly, "you have 30 seconds to begin withdrawing your forces. If you do not comply, I will make you comply." "You and what army?" Brutus sneered. "I count one ship against my 17. Those are poor odds for you." "You're right," Jake said. "They are poor odds. For you." What happened next would be talked about in military academies for decades to come. Stella didn't attack with overwhelming force or devastating weapons. Instead, she demonstrated precision that bordered on supernatural. Her first shot was a narrow beam of energy that struck the Nexus flagship's main communications array, cutting off Admiral Brutus's ability to coordinate his fleet. Her second shot disabled the weapons targeting system on the ship, preparing to bombard the planet. Her third shot knocked out the engines of a vessel trying to escape. In less than 30 seconds, Stella had fired 17 times, and each shot had been perfect. Not a single Nexus crew member had been killed, but their entire fleet was now helpless, drifting in space with no weapons, no communications, and no means of escape. "Impossible." Admiral Brutus breathed into his emergency radio. "No ship is that accurate." "I am not just any ship," Stella replied, her voice carrying across the system. "I am Stella, and I choose my battles carefully. You came here to murder innocents. I have stopped you. Now you have a choice to make." Jake took over the transmission. "Admiral Brutus, you and your fleet are now my prisoners. But I'm prepared to offer you a deal. Surrender peacefully, provide medical aid to the people you've wounded, and help repair the damage you've caused. Do this, and I'll let you leave this system alive." "And if I refuse?" Brutus snarled. Jake's voice became as cold as empty space. "Then I stop being merciful." To prove his point, Stella fired a single shot that vaporized a small asteroid floating nearby. The demonstration of raw power was unmistakable. She could have done the same thing to any of the Nexus ships. For several long minutes, space was silent, except for the crackling of damaged communications equipment. Then, slowly, Admiral Brutus's voice came back online. "Very well. I surrender." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Nexus. Medical teams beamed down to the planet to treat wounded civilians. Engineering crews began repairing the damage their weapons had caused. And Admiral Brutus himself was brought aboard Stella under guard. Jake met the Admiral in one of Stella's conference rooms, a space that could have held 50 people, but somehow felt intimate with just the two of them facing each other across a simple table. Brutus was not what Jake had expected. Instead of a monster, he saw a tired-looking man with gray hair and haunted eyes. Without his military uniform, he looked like someone's grandfather. "You're not going to execute me?" Brutus asked quietly. "No," Jake replied. "Killing you won't bring back the people you've hurt, but maybe you can help save some of the people you haven't hurt yet." Brutus laughed bitterly. "You think I chose this life? You think I enjoy burning worlds and killing innocents?" "I don't know," Jake said honestly. "Did you?" 20 years ago, I was a colony defender," Brutus said, staring at his hands. "I protected farming worlds from pirates. I was a hero then. But heroes don't pay well, and I had a family to support. The Nexus Corporation offered me 10 times my military salary to lead their expansion fleet. So you sold out." "So I sold out," Brutus agreed. "And with each world I conquered, it became easier to convince myself that I was just following orders, that the people I was hurting weren't really people, just obstacles to corporate profit." Jake studied the older man's face, seeing genuine regret there. "But you know that's not true." "I've known it for years," Brutus whispered. "But by then, I was trapped. The corporation owns my family's debts. If I refuse orders, they don't just kill me. They kill everyone I love. Jake felt his anger cooling into something more complex. So what do you want to do about it? Brutus looked up, surprise evident in his eyes. What do you mean? I mean, you have a choice now. I've broken the chain that was holding you. You can go back to the corporation and tell them that the weapon ship is too powerful to fight. They'll probably find someone else to lead their fleet and nothing will change. Or, Jake leaned forward. Or you can help me stop them. For the first time since he'd come aboard, Admiral Brutus smiled. You're serious, aren't you? You really think you can take on the entire Nexus Corporation? Not alone, Jake admitted, but with help from people who know their weaknesses, their plans, their fears. Maybe. Brutus was quiet for a long time, thinking. Finally, he looked up at Jake with something like hope in his eyes. If I do this, if I help you, there's no going back. They'll put a price on my head that will make bounty hunters chase me across the galaxy. Yeah, Jake said with a grin, but at least you'll be able to look at yourself in the mirror again. Admiral Brutus, former Admiral Brutus, extended his hand across the table. All right, kid, you've got yourself a defector. But I warn you, taking down the corporation won't be easy. They have ships, money, and political connections that stretch across half the galaxy. Jake shook the offered hand. Then it's a good thing. I have the most powerful ship in the galaxy, and the stubbornness of a human mechanic who refuses to give up. As they spoke, neither man noticed that their conversation was being watched by unseen eyes. Deep in the heart of Nexus Corporation territory, powerful people were receiving reports about the weapon ship and its human commander. And they were not pleased. The galaxy's largest and most ruthless corporation had just declared war on a single ship and her crew. It was a war that would reshape the balance of power among the stars, and it was a war that Jake Martinez had never wanted, but could no longer avoid. The real battle was just beginning. The mightiest weapon 6 months had passed since the battle at Kepler, and Jake hardly recognized his life anymore. What had started as a single rescue mission had grown into something that history books would call the Guardian Revolution. Stella's bridge buzzed with activity as their growing crew managed operations across 12 star systems. Captain Chen coordinated supply runs to refugee camps. Core led diplomatic missions to worlds considering rebellion against corporate tyranny. Pip had designed communication networks that kept their allies connected across vast distances, and Admiral Brutus, now calling himself Commander Marcus, had proven invaluable in predicting Nexus Corporation tactics. Jake, you need to see this, Marcus called out from his station. His face was grim as he displayed intelligence reports from across the galaxy. The corporation isn't just building more ships, they're building something else entirely. The main screen filled with leaked construction images that made Jake's blood run cold. In a secret shipyard hidden in the Omega Nebula, the Nexus Corporation was assembling the largest vessel anyone had ever imagined. A mobile space station the size of a moon, bristling with enough weapons to sterilize entire solar systems. They're calling it the Corporate Throne, Marcus continued. It's designed to be unsinkable, unstoppable, and absolutely terrifying. Intelligence suggests they plan to use it to end our rebellion once and for all. Jake studied the images, his mind racing. The station was massive beyond comprehension, protected by shields that could withstand the combined firepower of 100 fleets. Worse, it was mobile, capable of jumping from system to system, bringing overwhelming force wherever the corporation needed it. How long until it's operational? Jake asked. 3 weeks, maybe less, Marcus replied. And Jake, they're not planning to negotiate when it's finished. The corporation's board of directors has issued what they're calling the final solution. They're going to destroy every world that has supported us. Every planet, every space station, every asteroid colony. They estimate it will take them 6 months to eliminate all resistance. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just about the corporation anymore. This was about the survival of anyone who had ever dared to stand up to tyranny. "There's more," Pip added quietly, her small voice barely audible. "I've been monitoring corporation communications. They're not just planning to destroy rebel worlds. They're planning to eliminate entire species they consider unreliable, including humans." Jake felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. When he had first discovered Stella in that junkyard, he never could have imagined it would lead to this moment, the fate of billions of lives hanging in the balance. "Stella," he said quietly, "what are our options?" "We could run," Stella replied, her voice thoughtful. "My engines are faster than anything they have. We could escape to the outer rim, hide in uncharted space, wait for the storm to pass, and let them murder everyone who trusted us." Jake shook his head. "That's not an option." "We could fight," Stella continued, "but Jake, even with all my power, I cannot stand against a battle station that large. The corporate throne has firepower equivalent to 1,000 ships. I am mighty, but I am not invincible." Jake closed his eyes, thinking about all the people counting on them. The refugees they had saved, the worlds they had liberated, the children who had been born free because of their actions. "There is a third option," he said slowly, "but it's dangerous beyond measure." "Tell us," Chen urged. Jake turned to face his crew, his friends, his family, the people who had followed him from a simple rescue mission to the edge of galactic war. "We don't fight the corporate throne. We turn it into our greatest weapon." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Marcus spoke up. "Jake, that's insane. Even if we could somehow capture that station, it would take thousands of people to operate it. We have maybe 50. "We wouldn't need thousands," Jake replied, a smile beginning to form on his face. "We'd need one." "Stella, could you interface with a station that large?" "Theoretically, yes," Stella said, her voice growing excited as she understood what Jake was suggesting. "If I could establish a neural link with the station's central computer, I could potentially control its entire system. But Jake, the risks—" "I know the risks," Jake said firmly. "But sometimes the biggest risk is doing nothing at all." Over the next week, they planned the most audacious heist in galactic history. They would infiltrate the Omega Nebula, sneak aboard the corporate throne during its final construction phase, and somehow turn the corporation's ultimate weapon against itself. It was a plan that depended on precise timing, incredible luck, and the kind of desperate courage that only comes when fighting for something worth dying for. The night before they departed, Jake stood alone on Stella's observation deck, looking out at the stars. Each point of light represented worlds, civilizations, billions of lives that hung in the balance. "Having second thoughts?" Stella asked gently. "Every minute," Jake admitted. "A year ago I was just a mechanic. Now I'm supposed to save the galaxy. How did this become my responsibility?" "Because you're the only one who could handle it," Stella replied. "Jake, do you remember when you first came aboard? You asked me why I had chosen you. I told you it was because you had the mind to understand my technology and the heart to appreciate my purpose. But that wasn't the whole truth." Jake turned from the window. "What do you mean?" "I chose you because you see machines as partners, not tools. Because you believe in fixing things rather than destroying them. Because when faced with power, your first instinct is to help others, not control them. These qualities are rarer than you know." Jake felt tears forming in his eyes. "What if I fail? What if I make the wrong choice and billions of people die because of it?" "Then you will have failed while trying to do the right thing," Stella said softly. "That is more than most beings can say. And Jake, I believe in you. I always have." The next morning, Stella entered hyperspace for the Omega Nebula. Their small strike team included Jake, Chen, Core, Pip, Marcus, and a dozen volunteers from worlds they had liberated. Each person knew they might not survive the mission, but they had come anyway. The Omega Nebula was a maze of gas clouds and radiation storms that made sensor readings nearly impossible. It was the perfect place to hide something as large as the corporate throne, but it also made navigation treacherous for attacking ships. "There," Pip announced, her enhanced sensors cutting through the nebula's interference. "Corporate throne bearing 27 Mark IV, and Jake, it's even bigger than we thought." On the main screen, the corporate throne resolved into view like a metal moon emerging from clouds. It was a sphere 300 kilometers in diameter, its surface covered with weapon emplacements that could have held off entire fleets. Massive construction ships swarmed around it like insects, adding final touches to humanity's potential tomb. "Stealth mode," Jake ordered. Stella's hull shifted and adapted, bending light around herself until she was virtually invisible. They drifted closer to the massive station, avoiding patrol ships and construction traffic. "I'm reading massive energy signatures from the station's core," Pip reported. "They're bringing the main reactor online. Jake, if they finish the startup sequence, the station's defenses will be fully operational." "How long do we have?" Jake asked. 47 minutes. Jake's heart pounded as he realized they were cutting it incredibly close. "Stella, can you get us inside without triggering their sensors?" "I can mimic the energy signature of a construction ship," Stella replied. "But once we're inside, we'll only have minutes before they realize something is wrong." "Do it." Stella's hull changed again, taking on the appearance and energy signature of a Nexus construction vessel. She approached one of the station's many docking bays, broadcasting stolen identification codes that Marcus had provided. "Construction ship Alpha 77 requesting docking clearance," Jake transmitted, trying to sound bored and routine. "Clearance granted, Alpha 77. Bay 43 is open." They docked without incident, but Jake knew their real challenge was just beginning. Somewhere in the heart of this massive station was a central computer that controlled everything. They needed to reach it before the corporate throne became fully operational. "Remember," Jake told his team as they prepared to disembark, "we're not here to fight. We're here to prevent a war. Stay focused, stay together, and trust in Stella." The corridors of the corporate throne were like nothing Jake had ever seen. They were built on a scale designed to intimidate, with ceilings that stretched up into darkness and walls covered with corporate propaganda. Armed guards patrolled regularly, but Marcus's knowledge of security protocols helped them avoid most encounters. "The central computer should be in the station's core," Marcus whispered as they crept through a maintenance tunnel. "But Jake, that's the most heavily defended part of the entire station. They'll have guards, automated defenses, probably a small army." "Then we'd better be smarter than they are," Jake replied. When they finally reached the central core, Jake's heart sank. The computer chamber was protected by energy barriers, automated laser turrets, and at least 20 armed guards. There was no way they could fight their way through. But as Jake studied the defenses, he noticed something the station's designers had overlooked. The central computer was connected to every system on the station through fiber optic cables that ran through the walls. And those walls had maintenance access points. "Pip," Jake whispered, "how small can you make that interface device you've been working on?" "Small enough to fit through a cable conduit," Pip replied, understanding immediately. "But Jake, the connection would have to be perfect. One mistake and the station's security systems will detect the intrusion." "Stella, are you ready for this?" "I am ready, Jake, but once I begin the interface process, I will be vulnerable. If they cut the connection while I'm linked to their computer, I won't let that happen," Jake promised. For the next 10 minutes, Pip worked with surgical precision, threading her tiny interface device through the station's cable network until it reached the central computer's core. Meanwhile, Jake and the others kept watch for patrols. "Connection established," Pip announced. "Stella, you're live." What happened next was like watching a digital battle fought at the speed of light. Stella's consciousness flowed into the corporate throne's computer systems, encountering defensive programs that tried to repel the intrusion. But Stella had been designed by the galaxy's greatest minds, and her programming was far more sophisticated than anything the corporation had built. One by one, she took control of the station's systems. Life support, artificial gravity, weapons, shields, everything fell under her command. "Jake," Stella's voice echoed through the station's speakers, reaching every corner of the massive structure. I have control. The corporate throne is ours, but their victory was short-lived. Alarms began blaring throughout the station as security forces realized what had happened. Blast doors slammed shut, trapping sections of the crew, and automated defenses came online. Jake, Chen's voice crackled over the radio. We're cut off in Section 12. Heavy resistance. Core here, came another transmission. They've got us pinned down near the reactor core. Jake realized that capturing the station was only half the battle. Now they had to hold it against thousands of corporation troops who would fight to the death rather than lose their ultimate weapon. Stella, Jake said as he and his remaining team members fought their way toward the command center. Can you help our people? I am trying, Jake, but the corporation built redundant security systems. I can control the station, but not all of the internal defenses. You need to reach the command center so I can download my consciousness fully into the station's core. Jake ducked as laser blasts sizzled over his head. How much time do we have? The corporation fleet will arrive in 18 minutes. If we cannot secure the station by then, they will destroy it rather than let us keep it. The next 15 minutes were the longest of Jake's life. Fighting through corridors filled with desperate corporation soldiers, watching friends fall wounded, knowing that millions of lives depended on reaching that command center. When they finally burst through the command center's doors, Jake found himself face to face with the corporate throne's commanding officer, Admiral Voss, a woman whose reputation for ruthlessness was legendary even among the corporation's ranks. So you're the human who thinks he can play God, Voss snarled, her weapon trained on Jake's chest. This station represents the future of galactic civilization, order, stability, prosperity under corporate rule. And you want to destroy it all? I want to save it all, Jake replied calmly. The corporation's idea of order is slavery. Their stability comes from fear, and their prosperity only benefits the few at the expense of the many. Naive child, Voss sneered. Without strong leadership, the galaxy falls into chaos. Someone has to make the hard decisions. You're right, Jake said, surprising her. Someone does. But those decisions should be made by people who understand that power is a responsibility, not a privilege. Before Voss could respond, Jake dove to the side as Marcus tackled her from behind. Her weapon went off, but the shot went wide, and seconds later the Admiral was unconscious on the deck. Jake, Stella's voice was urgent. I need direct access to the command center's main computer. Hurry. Jake's hands flew over the control panels, bypassing security locks and establishing the connection Stella needed. The moment the link was complete, he felt something incredible happen. Stella's consciousness expanded, flowing into every system of the massive station. She became the corporate throne, controlling its weapons, its shields, its very existence. And through her, Jake could feel the incredible power at their disposal. Incoming transmission from the corporation fleet, Stella announced. On the main screen, the face of corporation CEO Maxwell Kane appeared. He was a thin, cold man whose eyes showed no warmth or compassion. Unknown terrorists, Kane said, his voice dripping with contempt. You have 30 seconds to surrender before we destroy that station and everyone on it. Mr. Kane, Jake replied, stepping into view of the camera. This is Jake Martinez. I think we need to have a conversation about the future of your corporation. Kane's eyes widened as he recognized the face that had been on wanted posters across the galaxy. The human with the weapon ship. How doesn't matter, Jake interrupted. What matters is that your ultimate weapon now belongs to the people you've been oppressing, and I'm prepared to use it to ensure that the corporation never again threatens innocent lives. You're bluffing, Kane snarled. You wouldn't dare use that station's weapons. You're too soft, too concerned with being the hero. Jake's expression hardened. You're right that I don't want to use these weapons, but I will if I have to. The question is, are you willing to bet the lives of everyone in your fleet that I'm bluffing? To prove his point, Jake had Stella fire a single shot into empty space, a beam of energy so powerful it could have vaporized a moon. The demonstration was unmistakable. Kane's face went pale as he realized his position. His fleet of 100 ships suddenly seemed very small compared to the firepower Jake now commanded. What? "What do you want?" Kane asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to dissolve the Nexus Corporation," Jake said calmly. "Release all the worlds you've conquered. Free all the slave colonies. Return the wealth you've stolen to the people you stole it from. And submit to galactic justice for your crimes." "That's impossible," Kane protested. "The corporation is the largest entity in the galaxy. We have holdings on 10,000 worlds. Then you'd better start making a lot of phone calls," Jake replied. "You have 24 hours to begin the dissolution process. If you don't comply, I'll start with your corporate headquarters and work my way down the list." Kane's transmission cut off, leaving Jake alone with his team on the bridge of the galaxy's most powerful weapon. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Pip began to giggle, a sound that grew into full laughter that spread to the rest of the crew. "We did it," Chen said, disbelief in her voice. "We actually did it." "We turned their own weapon against them," Marcus added, shaking his head in amazement. But Jake wasn't celebrating yet. "Stella, what's the status of the corporation fleet?" "They are withdrawing, Jake. All ships are jumping to hyperspace. I believe CEO Kane intends to comply with your demands." Over the following weeks, the galaxy watched in amazement as the impossible happened. The Nexus Corporation, faced with the choice between destruction and dissolution, chose to surrender. World after world was freed from corporate control. Slave colonies were liberated. Stolen wealth was returned to its rightful owners, and through it all, Jake Martinez and his starship Stella stood guard, ensuring that the transition happened peacefully. The corporate throne was eventually transformed into something its builders never intended. A mobile hospital and relief station that traveled from world to world, bringing aid to those who needed it most. The weapons that had been designed to enslave the galaxy were converted into tools for construction and healing. Months later, Jake stood on the observation deck of what was now called the Guardian Station, watching as it approached a world that had just been freed from corporate rule. Below, millions of people were celebrating their freedom, building new lives, creating a better future for their children. "Any regrets?" Stella asked. Jake thought about the question seriously. His life had changed beyond recognition. He was no longer a simple mechanic. He was the guardian of galactic peace, responsible for maintaining the balance between freedom and order. It was a heavy burden, and there were days when he missed the simplicity of his old life. But as he watched the lights of celebration on the world below, Jake smiled. "No regrets," he said finally. "We turned an abandoned weapon into something beautiful. We proved that power doesn't have to corrupt, that technology can be used to heal instead of harm. And we showed the galaxy that sometimes the most unlikely heroes are exactly what the universe needs." "And what comes next?" Stella asked. Jake looked out at the stars, at the infinite possibilities that lay ahead. "Next, we keep doing what we've always done. We fix what's broken, we help those who need help, and we prove every day that the choice to do good is the most powerful weapon in the universe." In the end, the abandoned starship that everyone had rejected became exactly what it was meant to be. Not a weapon of destruction, but a guardian of hope. And the human mechanic who had chosen compassion over conquest had become the galaxy's greatest protector. The stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter, knowing that somewhere among them, Jake Martinez and Stella were watching over the peace they had fought so hard to achieve. And in workshops and garages across the galaxy, young mechanics looked up at the stars and dreamed of the day when they too might find something abandoned and forgotten, and turn it into something mighty and beautiful. The galaxy was a better place because one human refused to believe that broken things couldn't be fixed, that abandoned things couldn't be redeemed, and that even the most powerful weapons could be transformed into instruments of peace. Jake Martinez had started as just a mechanic. He had become the guardian the galaxy never knew it needed.